Hello and welcome to the Football Code Business Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Manby, and on this show, my guest is Sebastian Ochs, Head of Global Football Partnerships for Allianz. I'll be talking to Sebastian about the brand's football strategy, specifically with regards to their stadium naming partnerships, as Allianz has the largest portfolio of stadium naming rights in the world, with 7, I think, I'll be checking that with Sebastian, football stadia bearing the Allianz name, including, of course, Bayern Munich's iconic Allianz Arena. Here's a good nugget of information for any stats fans out there. There's a huge geographical disparity when it comes to frequency of stadium naming rights deals. Compared to US, where across major sports upwards of 90% of teams have naming rights deals in place, that drops to below 30% for most European leagues. I believe 25% for the Premier League, aside from the Bundesliga, where it's upwards of 80%. So with that statistical curiosity out of the way, it's my great pleasure to welcome Sebastian to the show. Sebastian, hello.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's good to have you on the show. So let's start with the number. Let's get it right. How many stadia bearing the name of Allianz do you currently have in your portfolio?
So right now it's 7 stadia around the globe, basically, almost on every continent. You could say, it's 7 stadia, all with the name Allianz on them. Maybe there will be more soon to come. This is one of our big assets in our strategy when it comes to sponsoring and naming, if you will.
So I'll put you on the spot. Can you name all 7?
Yeah, I can. So obviously, as we are a Munich-based company, starting with the world famous Allianz Arena here in Munich, very iconic venue. As said, we are a global company, but we are based with our global headquarters also in Munich. So this was for us back then quite a no-brainer to go for this stadium. Then we have the Allianz Stadium Stadion, as it is pronounced in German, in Vienna, where Rapid Vienna plays in. Then we have the Allianz Stadium in Turin, in Italy, where the world famous Juventus Torino is playing in, obviously. Also a very iconic one, rebuilt on the ground of the Delle Alpi, obviously, back then. Then we're having the Allianz Riviera in France, also on a very iconic area and region, obviously, where the right now very successful OGC Nice is playing in, right? Currently second of the Ligue 1. Next to this, we have on the other side of the Atlantic, basically, we have the Allianz Field in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where Minnesota United plays in the MLS. Also a very little but iconic venue. We have had the MLS All-Star game there last year, which was also very successful happening, obviously. Then more south to it, or very south to it, we have in Sao Paulo the Allianz Parque. Also very iconic, club plays in there with Palmeiras. They recently got crowned Brazilian champions, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. So congratulations once again to Palmeiras. And then last but not least, we have in Sydney, Australia, we have more or less recently reopened the Allianz Stadium there. This is more of a national stadium. You could if you would compare it to Wembley, more the national team plays there here and there. It's a multi-purpose one, so more or less all of our winners are multi-purpose, but here they play cricket and rugby as well on a kind of like a regular basis. And I think this...
I count 7. 4 in Europe, then US, Brazil, Sydney. I count 7. So there's obviously more to Allianz's sponsorship and particularly football strategy than just stadium partnerships. But as you said yourself, they play a key role. What is it about stadium naming rights which you've identified as so important?
Well, as said already, we are a global company, but also with local roots, right? So whenever we commit to a region and to an area, we want to do that with a long term approach, and alongside with that approach, a naming of a stadium, does go alongside very well with it, right? So this is basically in the back of our head. So we are not fans of one-offs or so. We always are having the long-term approach in mind. And with that, a stadium and slash a stadium naming right, does go along, as already said, very well. So because in normal circumstances, those contracts with stadium namings last at least, let's say 10 years or even longer, right? So this is really our approach there. We always want to be there for a long time, to show also our commitment for the respective region.
When you're sort of lining up the next one, and I know you've already teased us by saying there might be some more to come, what do you look at? Is it about geography? Obviously, you've got 7 stadia, each in different countries. So could we assume the next one would be in a country where you're not already sponsoring a stadium? Is it about the stature of the club, the success, the pedigree, the prestige? Is it about the stadium itself? Presumably, it's important that Allianz has its name on a fresh, modern, good-looking stadium and not something that needs a lick of paint.
Yeah, well, we always count and rely very much on our suggestions as well from our colleagues in the respective markets, right? So this is a very important fact in all that, in all this, the consideration of this. So most of the time, or mainly, we get approached of our colleagues in the markets, saying here are something, or here's something cool or new coming up. And this is the first step then, right? It's also very important that we are talking about a new to be built stadium. We actually try to avoid renaming arenas, because the feedback towards this might turn out a bit mixed, to be honest, and also stats are showing this, right? So, and well, it's also important that we are talking about more or less state of the art venues, as you already mentioned as well, Alex. So sustainability, for example, is a very important thing for us, right? So we want the arenas to be as sustainable as possible, and really try to engage our future partners as well, the clubs, the venue owners, to be as sustainable as possible. Yeah, as said, this is one core value of our brand, and of our values at Allianz, obviously. So and with this, a lot of other points are going into that, but those were the main points coming to my head, basically.
How important is corporate hospitality? You see every new stadium that's built has amazing facilities for corporate hospitality. I think particularly in the US. I mean, actually, a lot of these venues in the US are like open 24/7. They have shopping malls, they have restaurants, but the corporate hospitality is amazing compared to, I think, even just a couple of decades ago, when you were sort of basically just in one of the better seats in the stadium and maybe you got a nice sandwich at half time.
Yeah. Agree. But to be fairly honest as well, we would not go into a partnership or into a naming partnership specifically just for corporate hospitality. This is definitely an added value, but not, let's say, a must-have, right? We are always looking for a 360-degree approach there as well. So it's more about asset, showing commitment to the region, showing commitment to the club, telling great stories with the club together around the venue and around the club, playing in the venue, and stuff like that. So it's not mainly about corporate hospitality. As said, this comes along with it most of the time, but it's not our main driver when talking about naming a venue.
That makes sense, particularly thinking about how global football is and the global reach it has. There might well be 80,000 people in the Allianz Arena watching Bayern Munich, but there's, hundreds of times more people than that watching, the game on TV and so on. So, yeah, no, that makes sense. I want to dig into a little bit more what makes it right for Allianz rather than, overall, why is a stadium naming strategy a solid move? Do you think it would be a good strategy for any brand, or is there something specific about Allianz which makes you think this is right for us?
Well, already said already. I always say that I have the feeling, but as said, we are looking for long-term partnerships in basically all we are doing. We sponsorship is a big pillar of our marketing mix, and also within our other sponsorings, we are aiming for long-term partnerships there as well. And a stadium naming does offer this quite good. And with that being said, it offers also a lot of opportunities which might not be such a no-brainer for others, or for the people outside of the marketing world, let's say. So with that being said, our aim there is really showing commitment and being able to tell the stories in the respective areas and arenas, obviously, which never been told before. Storytelling is of such an important point these days in marketing, and also in our branch and in the financial world, let's say, it's a lot about trust, right? And we want the consumers being able to trust us as a brand. And we've seen in stats that with naming a venue, people tend to perceive a brand as very trustworthy, right? So this is also one of our aims with that as well, obviously, apart from that the people can trust us, right? But you need to tell this, obviously, and you need to show us as well.
Yeah, Sebastian, I wanted to talk about that trustworthiness point for me because my perception was that, Allianz financial services company, probably trustworthiness is like the most important thing you can have. If you without that, nobody's going to want to work with you. And it felt to me like maybe the trustworthiness and the credibility of the stadium naming would be important. It also felt to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe a financial services company doesn't have the right, or it would be sort of unnatural to create campaigns which perhaps a more endemic brand might do. It'd be very strange if Allianz suddenly started creating talent-led cultural zeitgeist, thumping music, football adverts like a Gatorade or an Adidas does.
Yeah, of course. Totally agree there. It's not something we maybe didn't consider in the past or will consider in the future. Let's see. You always need to go with the trend, obviously, as well, and especially talking about reaching younger audiences and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm totally on the side you just said, Alex. It's really about being able telling stories and as said already, and doing also campaigns which are not being able to do maybe in the ordinary way in media campaigns, talking about media campaigns and stuff like that, specifically as a financial brand, right? So as said already, this is very specific in the financial world, let's say. And with that, with the sponsoring and also with the naming of venues, obviously, and the club partnerships alongside with those naming partnerships, we are able to tell other stories as well as an ordinary financial brand, let's say.
You've talked about stories a couple of times there, and campaigns, and that's really interesting because, again, this is a perception that I'm happy to be corrected on. But my perception is that stadium sponsorship by itself gives you huge brand awareness, massive visibility, close association with premium rights holders, the likes of these major clubs that you're talking about. But by itself, probably limited audience engagement. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is fair to say from a first perspective that that it might be kind of like one-sided, talking about a naming partnership, and that it might be not that engaging with the audience. But if you dive a bit deeper into that possibility and into this asset of naming a venue, you see a lot of opportunities coming up. as said already, around storytelling and being able to tell our messages, our brand messages, also together with the club, having great activations in the venue as well outside of the football world. So you're even able to even tell stories which might attract other audiences outside of the football world as well, depending obviously how multi-purpose the venue itself is, but also how iconic the venue is. It's really a tons of facts and figures going alongside with the venue. But as said, from a first perspective, I get that you might see a naming partnership kind of like one-sided and non-engaging, but as we are always trying to be as flexible and as innovative there, it isn't actually. We also can say that it can be very engaging, and we always try to be as engaging as possible. Also, for example, offering people like once in a lifetime experiences in the venues. Like, just imagine you and your hobby or Sunday football league team are able to play at the world famous Allianz Arena, for example, or something like that. So yeah, as said, there are a lot of opportunities there. We always try to see and work out it, basically.
And do you identify these opportunities, this activation strategy, right from the beginning when you're talking? Let's say you're talking to a football club in South Africa, and you're saying, well, we want to name the stadium. Will you already be thinking about that activation strategy where where you're able to shift audience perception of your brand, you're able to transmit more complex messaging about Allianz, such as brand values or even products or services?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We are doing that, or we try to do that from the beginning of the negotiations on, basically. So, we, in an ideal world, we implement all or the main activation pillars already into the contract. But other than that, as you need to stay flexible there as well, we definitely, together with our colleagues in the respective countries, try to set up a proper activation plan around the respective venues then, because those are the big pillars in having a naming right. So it's really about that, and it's really about having great activations around that asset. So this is really a very, very important point to us, not having just a, let's say, static billboard. As said, it's about activating this billboard.
Sebastian, I want to delve into the longevity point, which you've talked about a little bit. And I also want to talk about the sort of fan reaction to stadium naming, because I think that's interesting. And I want to go back to that stat that I mentioned in the intro. So 90% of major US sports teams have naming rights in place. 30% across Europe, generally speaking, 25% Premier League, but 80% Bundesliga. What is it about Germany that makes it commonplace?
Well, it's a trend. We see also in the whole European world. Let's say it's a trend, and it will increase for sure. But it's also depending on a lot of facts and figures as well. Also, brands here and there might not be willing or willing to risk this to name a venue, because, as already mentioned, it's always a thin line, especially talking about renaming venues, right? So but the thing also is, in Germany specifically, I would say, is that over the last, let's say, decade, a lot of new venues have been built in Europe, in Germany, sorry. So like for the, or let's say, the last 2 decades, the last 20 years, also for the World Cup in 2006 in Germany and stuff like that, the venues really have been rebuilt, and with that they lost their maybe traditional flavor here and there, and the willingness to rename those venues was there for brands. And as you say, in Germany there are a lot of branded venues out there already. England is a bit specific, because I have the feeling most of the venues there are, if they get renovated, basically they purely renovated on their specific locations there, right? So like talking about Old Trafford, if you will. So having been there, obviously it's such a traditional ground, and it is there since ages, I would even say. So also in the perception of the fans and the supporters, right? So going there and rename that might really, really be very, very controversial. And and that being said, I think brands are not willing to risk that. But I think in the future, and the trend shows us as well, there will be naming partnerships also increasing in the UK for sure. I hope that answers your question. If
No,
not,
it's a terrific answer. It's exactly the answer I was looking for. And you raised a very interesting point about the new stadiums. I'm thinking about Premier League, and I'm thinking, Brentford's G-Tech, brand new stadium. Brighton's Amex, new stadium. The Emirates was the Emirates, from day one when Arsenal moved. It was already called the Emirates. So you make a good point. And then obviously, I think the flip side of that, the one that shines out in this, may have something to do with the popularity of the owner and his motives for doing it. But Newcastle, right, changed St James's Park to the Sports Direct Arena, and that was hugely unpopular. So no, very interesting food for thought. Do you understand the controversy? Like, do you understand fans' negative feedback when their stadium, and particularly thinking about a current existing stadium which they've known and loved and called whatever its name is for so long, suddenly gets changed?
yeah, I do. I totally understand that because, as said, a fan, I would say, and being a football fan as well, I can just underline that is you want to see your ground, and you want to remember your ground as you got to know it, basically, right? So and you want to remember it as well. And all of a sudden, if there is a different name on it, yeah, this might be seen, or is often seen, very, very controversial, and I totally get that, right? But as said, depending on where this name is coming from and stuff like that, I think this offers also massive opportunities for the club and for the fans as well. So that's also what we always try to being able to deliver to the fans, to add a value for them as well, right? So this is not our point of view, but I get if a fan sees it very controversial.
I think the longevity point is important as well. As you said, kit sponsors change quite frequently. Sometimes not. Carlsberg and Liverpool have been doing it for 30 years. Lots of, but kit sponsors frequently change. The brand who makes the kit frequently changes. Not for Bayern Munich, of course, where Adidas, along with Allianz, own a chunk of the team. But you're right that the name of a stadium is, whether it's named after a brand or whether its original name, it lasts for a long time. Does that bring about a sense of added responsibility, I suppose?
Of course, yeah. As said, this is really a responsibility we are happy to take, happy to tackle. Is this long-term commitment into the name, into the club, into the region, and this is something which is really important for us as Allianz. So, as you say, this is really a great responsibility, and we don't want to be this hop on, hop off brand of a jersey or a training wear or whatsoever. So this is really something we are aiming for, to stand for stability, to stand for trustworthiness and stuff like that. So this is a really important point to us.
You said the word training wear there, which is interesting because I wanted to ask you about training wear. Stadium naming absolutely is a trend, across global sport, and particularly if we look at our friends the other side of the Atlantic, we can see that trend particularly strongly. Training wear sponsorship is another trend. I think if you told me 20 years ago that clubs would be signing 7 or 8 figure deals to have the name of a brand on their training wear, I'd have sort of laughed at you. And yet, this is happening, right? I mean, reportedly, Manchester United get £20 million a year from Tezos for their name on the training wear. And in fact, Allianz have done this as well, right? It's with Juventus. Allianz have the training wear sponsorship. What were the incentives behind that deal, and how did you go about evaluating the benefits of it?
Well, to be fair, we always looking obviously apart from the naming and naming a venue. We always try to improve and to extend our partnerships with the clubs playing in the venues as well. First there was the naming of the stadium, and then we were looking into other assets as well. And obviously, the club is offering new assets as well to us. So this is basically how it went down. And what we can see as well is that most of the time you see a player in their trainings wear, right? Other than in the actual playing jersey, if you will, right? So this is really something we kind of like studied as well, and we saw that the trainings wear is very present everywhere. If you think about the social media content, most of it is shot normally at the trainings grounds, and then they wear the trainings gear, obviously, right? So this is something we saw and identified as a great opportunity as well for us being present and getting exposure as well, right? So this is basically what was behind it. But as said, talking about Juventus as well, first there was the naming partnership, let's say, and then we are always try to increase our partnership if we are satisfied with it. Of course, we are there, and then we try to also find new ways. So this is how we try to work there.
The social media point is a good point there. I mean, the fans have such a voracious appetite to consume content, and particularly when it's content from their heroes, their superstars. So there's a demand for these players to publish, and they spend a lot of time on the training ground. So yeah,
That's it. That's basically it. And we totally saw that a couple of times. Just giving you an example, if you think about when Cristiano Ronaldo was moving to Manchester United, back to Manchester United, I think, when was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
perhaps
Something like
three.
that. Yeah. When that was announced, basically, we saw still so many pictures with Allianz branding out there, because a lot of media was also taking the trainings footage or training stills, because that's also another thing, talking about a licensing maybe point of view or rights point of view. Mainly or most of the time, those trainings pictures are free to use for editorial purposes, right? Other than stills which were created during a match, for example. So this is also something which is a great asset as well, being able to free distribute it or distribute it for free to media, those trainings pictures. So there are a lot of advantages there, and yeah, with the Cristiano example, we saw a lot of exposure for us, even though we obviously were not actively involved there. But yeah, just having this the our brand on the trainings kit was a great asset there.
Is it something you'd look to replicate with other clubs that you have relationships with?
Maybe it's not our main focus as said, but it could be if the offer is right, and as you just said, obviously clubs realizing that there's a potential there as well on a financial from a financial point of view. But yeah, as said, definitely something we are always having an eye on. Also talking about, and we are a big supporter of women's football as well. So we are front of jersey with Bayern Munich women as well, or we are back of jersey with Juventus women, and there's a huge potential as well. Still, I think, or we think, to have brand awareness there as well, not only on the training gear but wherever, right? So I just wanted to add that as well. So as said, we are always looking for new trends in the world of football, obviously, and new possibilities.
Sebastian, I like to end these podcasts by gazing into the crystal ball, by looking into the future, making some predictions or seeing what the future holds. I'm sure you're not going to reveal any individual club names, but can you tell us what would be interesting if Allianz were to sign another stadium deal? And it sounds like there are certain plans underway for that. which region would it likely be in? Which country would it likely be in? What are the main considerations as you move towards this next deal?
Yeah, as said already a couple of times, it always depends on our colleagues in the specific countries slash regions, and also it depends if there will be a new venue, per example, because as said, we really try to avoid renaming a venue. So, well, the next one might be in an area we obviously, and you already said that, Alex, we are not present yet. So, also when talking about the continent, so this might be already a massive hint, actually. And yeah, other than that, there might be new partnerships in 2024 coming up when talking about naming, but it's obviously not as frequent as other sponsorings because, as said, this is a lot of work that needs to be done before naming a venue. And a lot of facts and figures need to be considered as well. Also talking about where is our return on investment there and stuff like that. So we are doing always a lot of analyzing, talking about that as well. So yeah, but this is all I can say now. Have an eye on it, observe it. We will, or you hopefully will soon hear about our new partnership potentially coming up. And
That's fantastic, Sebastian. Thank you very much. I will keep an eye out. No doubt Football Co's team of sellers will do the same and be picking up the phones as soon as an announcement is made. Sebastian, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me again.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and who knows, maybe even give us a rating and a review. Thank you very much. All the best.